Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because today we are talking about music, and today we are doing a good old-fashioned album review. I love getting into these albums, and today we're going to be taking a look at Zoot Suit Riot, the swinging hits of Cherry Poppin Daddies, out on Mojo Records, and another tiny little label we will get into as well. There's the back there. We'll show that sweet, sweet cover again. We got our Zoot suited individual. So why am I doing this up? Why Cherry Poppin' Daddies, right? A couple of reasons, a couple really cool reasons. So one, we're all music collectors here, but so often we just kind of grab a CD, either a new album, find it thrifting, find it in the wild, a friend gives it to us, something. We get albums in our collection, and they just sort of hang out. We never listen to them. We don't gather, their history, why they're important to us or to someone else. And they sort of hang out. So I've got my little CD rack beside me of the albums where that's kind of the case, and I feel like I should be listening to them. So this is the first one on that pile. That's one reason. That's the pragmatic reason. Second reason, this is just a fascinating story. The story behind this album is really, really cool. Whether or not I like the music, and we'll get into what I think of the music, is one side of it, but just the lessons that you can learn from the development of this album for all bands is fascinating, and how we kind of become fans of bands and what that means to the bands as well. So let's get into it. So Cherry Poppin' Daddies, these guys, once again, formed in Eugene, Oregon in 1989. They have three albums out to the point of this album's release. So they have one out in 90, 94, and 96. So right around this time, if you think about, what's happening, especially down in California, but obviously moving up to the coast, ska and ska punk is having their third wave revival. So bands like No Doubt, obviously gaining popularity, Sublime gaining popularity. And while not quite at this point, definitely in the underground, and it will explode shortly, bands like Real Big Fish are really making a name for themselves. Bands like Less Than Jake in Florida are really making a name for themselves. So you have that ska punk revival happening. Now, I thought these were a swing band. Well, we'll get into that. But you also have bands like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, movies like Swingers, kind of putting that or not the ska, the swing revival also back into the mainstream. And that's kind of where these guys come in. Now, if you listen to their albums, they do have swing music. They also have rockabilly. They also have punk. They do have quite a lot of ska. In fact, years later, they put out an album that's all of their ska music as a companion to this. So this is one thing. I see this album thrifting all the time, and I picked it up thinking it was just one of their albums. It's actually a compilation. So they're playing shows, they're gaining popularity, but anytime anyone goes up to their merch booth afterwards, people say, which album has the most swing on it? To the point where the band says, hey, why don't we just put together a little compilation on Space Age, what is it called? Space Age Studio Gung, no, it's the studio. Space Age Bachelor Pad was the name of their little album that they decide to put it out on. They collect all of their swing songs plus four unreleased tracks to that point, and make this kind of DIY compilation, because people are always asking, I just want the swing stuff, just want the swing stuff. So that's what they do. And it's selling super well, but it's DIY. So it's obviously got a much kind of lower print run. In 1996, Cherry Poppin' Daddies go on tour with Real Big Fish, who right around that time released Turn the Radio Off with the song Beer. That's kind of their big hit, shooting them into the stratosphere. And Aaron Barrett, the lead singer from Real Big Fish, says, hey, we're on Mojo Records. Why don't you have a meeting? And so Steve Perry, not that Steve Perry, Steve Perry, the lead singer, songwriter, and I believe guitarist as well for this band. They have a meeting. They get signed to Mojo Records, who agree to put this album out as well. And they decide to make Zoot Suit Riot the lead single. The band was kind of against it. They're like, what? It's 1997. Who's gonna pay attention to this swing revival song? A lot of people, apparently. So March 18th, 1997, this album comes out. It's just over 50 minutes in length, and it's produced by the band itself. And that's kind of where we get to. So you'd think at the beginning, like, hey, things are going well. People are kind of noticing us. Like this becomes big this becomes big. Number one on the heat seeker charts, it hits the top 20 on the Billboard 200. It goes double platinum by the year 2000 in the States, hits gold in Canada, gold in New Zealand. Things are going great. But the thing is, the band, and I've seen them once for sure. I think maybe I've seen them twice. I've seen them once for sure because the lead singer got a shock from the microphone and shorted out the venue. And that was pretty electrifying, pretty cool. For sure once. And they talk about how we're not just a swing band. People know us for our swing music, especially because of the song and this album, but we're not just a swing band. And that's kind of what they became known as even today. That's if you ask someone, if you know the band name, they probably don't know the band name, but if you ask them, do you know the song Zoot Suit Riot? They will know that song. And I think that's the fascinating story here. And I'll get into the album itself next, but that is kind of the cool story or interesting story is a band making it big based on one of the genres they perform, but not all of the genres they perform. And they kind of get shoehorned into a specific look and sound. And I find that interesting because the same thing happens with Real Big Fish on Mojo Records later. Their album Cheer Up put out the lead singles that are decidedly not at all what the band sounds like for the most part, because they didn't know how to be marketed. That's another story for another time, but very similar story happens to that band as well. So Cherry Poppin Daddies, as I said, there's 14 tracks on here, 4 of them previously unreleased, including the titular hit, Zoot Suit Riot, which I don't think is the best song on this album. When I Change Your Mind, Brown Derby Jump, and No Mercy for Swine. Now, one really cool thing I found while listening to this album is it does sound like a compilation. And I think before when I listened to it, just put it on without really reading even the liner notes. You don't get that feeling that it's a compilation. And then when you figure that out, you're like, yeah, the production does vary track to track. It's consistent. You can tell it's the same band. But even then, sometimes you can tell when some musicians have come in and out of the band. There's quite a lot of musicians that are on here. So that said, we'll kind of go through. So Zoot Suit Riot opens it up. I'm not a connoisseur of swing music. I can't really tell you the intricacies of it. So for the most part, this is big band swing stuff. It's great. Ding Dong Daddy of the D-Car line sounds very kind of mid-century to me. Not a massive fan of that one. When I Change Your Mind is another one of the previously unreleased tracks, and I enjoy that one quite a bit. Here Comes the Snake and Mr. White Keys are very fun. Comeback Baby is a nice one. And then I do think Brown Derby Jump, the third unreleased track, is probably my favorite on this album. Actually, I think this is definitely an album that starts kind of strong, kind of sways, and it's actually the middle I find is quite strong because we go Brown Derby Jump to Dr. Bones, which is probably another one of my favorite tracks on here. And then you go Pink Elephant, Master and Slave, Drunk Daddy. Those ones kind of sag a little bit for me. And then we pick it up by the end with No Mercy for Swine, Cherry Poppin Daddies Strut, and Shake Your Love Maker, which is another great closer. I like that as a closer. I think the album itself is sequenced really well. I think the band took a lot of time deciding, even if there's a lot of similarities in the genre, and there's not a lot of room for change, but you do have some that are faster, mid-tempo, slower. How can we arrange it in a really engaging way? And I think they do that really well on here. That said, the track Zoot Suit Riot, if you haven't heard it, check it out. But otherwise, kind of the low-key gems on here, I'm going to say, are Dr. Bones and Brown Derby Jump. I point that out. And that's kind of my very quick review of this album because I think the album itself, it's a great album. It's a very fun compilation if you want some of that swing revival, but it's almost the story behind it that I find fascinating. I think especially in this, I'm going to say digital age, in this age of musicians, about how do you reinvent yourself now, right? I think this couldn't necessarily happen now because a band's catalog is so accessible and making your own playlist is so easy on so many streaming services or download services that a band doesn't need necessarily to market a specific image. They can have a variety of images because they're all so accessible. They don't go away. There's a very low barrier to entry in terms of your own finances as a consumer, how to get into that band. So I do think that's kind of a story that has changed and adapted over time, just kind of part of that history of music that we all know and love. And I'm really happy that I had to get into that kind of discussion because I think it's worth talking about tons of other bands. And it's weird that, Zoot Suit Riot, Cherry Poppin Daddies were the ones that, for me, kind of sparked that idea. But, March 18th, 1997, based on three previously unreleased albums, four unreleased tracks, Cherry Poppin Daddies, Zoot Suit Riot. That's my review for today. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.